Hello everyone and welcome again to my channel. Today we're going to be going through the 2018 Senate election as it stands today on October 6, 2018, exactly 31 days, 1 month, before the election day on November 6, 2018. This is the Senate as it stands today with 51 Republicans and 49 Democrats. We can see that the map is very uncomfortable for the Democrats in this election because if all the states that went for Donald Trump in 2016 would have gone to the Republicans, we would have a supermajority in the Senate with 60 Republicans and only 40 Democrats. All the states have Democratic incumbents, such as Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Indiana, West Virginia, Missouri, North Dakota, Montana, and the state of Florida. So the map of our prediction is as like as this one. So the first states we're going to fill in are the states that are safe for Democrats or Republicans. And the ratings that we will make today are based not only on polling data that we have available at this point in time on October 6th, but also based on fundamentals and general data available from the states for this election. So the two independent seats in Maine and Vermont are one of the most safest for the Democrats, along with the states of New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Delaware, the state of Maryland, Minnesota special election where Amy Klobuchar is one of the most popular senators from the Democratic side, the state of New Mexico, Hawaii, California, Washington, and pretty much also the state of Virginia. In this state, Democrats are pretty popular, especially in Vermont, Maine, Minnesota, New York, Massachusetts, and the state of Maryland, and they're doing phenomenal in polls. While states that are safe for the Republicans by now are only Wyoming, Utah, and Mississippi regular election. We'll talk about the special election later. The states that are now considered likely for Democrats are firstly Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, three states that went for Donald Trump very narrowly in 2016, and right now the Democrats incumbents are doing pretty well in the polls. In fact, we can see at the state of Pennsylvania, where Bob Casey is ahead by 16 points on average, according to Real Clear Politics. And also we can see that in the states of Michigan, Debbie Stabenow is ahead by more than 17 points, and in the state of Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin is ahead by 11 points. Another state that is now pretty likely for the Democrats is the state of Ohio, where Sherrod Brown is doing phenomenally in contrast with the beginning of this year. So the state of Ohio is also rated as likely Democratic. In the state of New Jersey, I see this state going by a considerable margin to Bob Menendez, the incumbent, even though he was caught up in a corruption trial and his disapproval rating is higher than his approval rating. I don't see this safely Democratic state in the presidential election going to the Republican, Bob Eugen in this case. Going over to Minnesota special election, I see this going also to Tina Smith, Democrat incumbent appointed by the governor by a considerable margin because Minnesota is a Democratic state, went narrowly to Hillary Clinton, but now is turning away a lot from the president. So I see the state going to Tina Smith, the special election here. A seat that is likely going to the Republicans is Mississippi special election because Cindy Hyde Smith is doing pretty well, and we have only a runoff that is held on November 6th, a primary actually, and a runoff held on November 27th, so we don't have much data from the state. But Mississippi is a very Republican state, and I don't see the Democrats having a big shot there, having a large chance of winning there. And the same I think about the state of Nebraska, which is actually not safe 100% as is Wyoming or Utah, for example, for the incumbent Republican Deb Fischer, because she's not so popular as she should be in a safe Republican state as Nebraska is. And so I see the state going by a considerable margin, but not safely, to the Republicans. Now let's get into the close races. So the states that the Democrats are targeting in order to get a majority are the states of Nevada, Arizona, Tennessee, and Texas, I believe more than the three states, because the state of Texas has a pretty popular incumbent. We all know him, Ted Cruz, and Democrats are targeting the state heavily because the polls showed close numbers for a Republican state as Texas is. In the state of Texas, we see that Ted Cruz is ahead by 4 points, 4.6 points. But in a poll taken on September 18th, Beto O'Rourke, his Democratic challenger from El Paso, was actually in the lead by 2%. And that is very surprising for a state like Texas, going very narrowly to Ted Cruz and showing an only even one poll as a Democratic challenger of a Republican incumbent in the lead. So now let's look at the state of Texas, and I rate the state of Texas as leaning in the Republican column, but not tilting, because 4% of the average is not as close as Democrats hope. So I see the state going narrowly by now, but still going to Ted Cruz. Then we have a state like Missouri, which is the most boring state regarding on this Senate campaign and Senate election, because every poll we see in the state of Missouri shows a very close margin of around +1, +2, and a tie. So from the month of August, we see tie, 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 Hawley +3, Hawley +2, McCaskill +3, and then tie. So the current average is Hawley +0.4. But this state is actually one of the few states that I'll consider as a pure toss-up state. Not even a tilt Republican or tilt Democrat, but we don't have enough information to call the state for Claire McCaskill or George Hawley by now. Going over to the state of Indiana, I see Joe Donnelly narrowly winning in the state because of his pretty popularity in a state that is Mike Pence's home state. And if we look at the numbers, the last poll we have is at the beginning of this month, so 5 days ago it shows Donnelly +2, so it's pretty a comfortable margin for Joe Donnelly. So that's why I believe this state going to him narrowly in the tilt column, not in the leaning column. But a state is leaning for Democrats is the state of Montana, where Jon Tester is a very popular Democratic incumbent in this safe Republican state, as Montana it is. Not as Republican as North Dakota or Nebraska, but Jon Tester is doing pretty well in the polls recently, and this average is Tester +3. So we have not any poll that shows Matt Rosendale in the lead, so that's why I rate this state as leaning in the Democratic column. Not likely, because there isn't a comfortable margin as we found in the state of Pennsylvania, Ohio, or the rest of the Rust Belt. Going over to the state of Arizona, I rate this state as leaning in the Democratic column because Kyrsten Sinema is doing very well. After the primary, we see some polls where Martha McSally was in the lead. Yeah, the primary was held on August the 28th. So at the beginning of September, we see McSally in the lead. But soon after, Kyrsten Sinema became in the lead, and actually we have the average of 3.5%. So this is a pretty comfortable margin for a lean Republican state, as Arizona is. Going over to Nevada, the state of Nevada is a pretty toss-up state. But Dean Heller is a very unpopular incumbent, and J.K. Rosen is doing pretty well in polling data. Not as well as it should be, because this state is the only state that has a Republican incumbent in the Senate and went for Hillary Clinton in 2016. So even though Rosen had a 4% lead in a Cinean poll conducted at the end of September, I'll feel the state as tilt in the Democratic column. In the state of Florida, we have another interesting Senate situation because Rick Scott was in the lead for much of the summer, from the end of June till the end of September. Then, on September the 25th, we started Bill Nelson, incumbent Democratic senator, in the lead. So this state is one of the most hardly contested swing states in presidential election, and also in Senate election and in gubernatorial election, as we can see from the gubernatorial race. That is pretty interesting this year. So Bill Nelson was in the lead at the beginning, then Rick Scott was in the lead, and then we had some polls conducted recently that showed Bill Nelson in the lead, firstly by 7 points, and then by 1, and then again by 1. So this average is 2.4%. So this is another state that I list as a tilt in the Democratic column. In the state of West Virginia, Joe Manchin is doing phenomenally in polls. If we think that West Virginia is one of the most Republican states in the country, actually the second Republican state after Wyoming in the 2016 election. At the beginning, Joe Manchin was in the lead by 7 points, and then his lead grew by 3 points until Manchin plus 10.5, and now it's back at Manchin plus 9.3 or 9.4 in the average. So this state is leaning in the Democratic column, not likely because the margins for Democrat aren't as comfortable as I just said previously as in the states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, in this Rust Belt states. Finally, we have the states of North Dakota, which is the last state that we're going to fill in, and this state is now leaning too likely for the Republicans, because if we see the average, it's the only state that Real Clear Politics rates as leaning GOP, even though there is a Democratic incumbent. And this state showed a margin, a really high margin for Kevin Cramer. The last poll where Heitkamp leads was in February, and since the end of September, Kevin Cramer has increased his lead till 12 points. Yes, so the average is Cramer plus 8.7. So this state is leaning and not likely in the Republican column because of this margin and because of the fact that there is a Democratic incumbent. It is not very unpopular because according to Morning Consult, she has a poll rating of about 45%, so it's not popular, but it's not very unpopular. On the final Senate map here, we have 49 Democrats to 49 Republicans coming down to the states of Missouri and Tennessee. If we see the Real Clear Politics average for these two states, we have Hawley plus 0.4 in the state of Missouri, and Marsha Blackburn plus 0.5 in the state of Tennessee. Now, Tennessee and Missouri are safe Republican states in presidential election, but Tennessee has Phil Berryson on the Democratic side. It is a very popular governor, a former governor from the state, and we had polls in September, Berryson plus 5, and at the end of August, Berryson plus 2. So that is a pure toss-up state, because even though the Real Clear Politics average is now Blackburn plus 0.5, I don't see this state by now going nearly to Marsha Blackburn. This could be, but for now, I leave this as a pure toss-up, and the same thing as the state of Missouri. So thank you guys all for watching this video. Please comment below for suggestions, and so